the arcade game that's called Lord of King. And it's of course completely different from this game. No real storylines going along with it. It's of course better graphically. I fight a lot of praying mantises, at least in the first level throughout that game. And the music's not as good, so that's a disappointment. I really don't count that as a sequel or whatever, but this game, as I'm facing off with the second boss, mini-boss of World 2, or, the third mini-boss in general, is extremely easy. I used my fire on him. And now here we go with a classic boss that we've seen in Castlevania games throughout the years. This is a Medusa that throws little snakes at us, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to duck right in front of her, about where she's going to stop, duck, hit that jewel on the front of her. She'll throw over the snakes over my head, but I'll just turn around while still ducking to be able to hit them. Do this a few times and this boss will easily be taken care of, but like I was saying, this is one of those games that I always wished really had a sequel, and it's probably because I love the storyline so much. And even though this game really doesn't leave room exactly for a sequel, it's not like a sequel couldn't have been created. Maybe on the SNES, because this was created in 1990. So the focus on a Super Nintendo game or a Super Famicom game or whatever wouldn't have been, too far of a thought. So that would have been really cool to do. There has been some games that had similar systems, or at least were similar action and similar in style that came out on the SNES, but never, of course, one that was named Astyanax 2 or part of, that was Astyanax 2. But this game is probably, as well as 8 Eyes, which I've already played through, and it's another one of my favorite games of all time. Those two games would probably be, if I could create 2 sequels to any video games, or any sequel at all, those would be the 2 games I would choose from. 8 Eyes and Astyanax. As we are continuing now with more storyline that goes along, you actually, of course, throughout this game, are actually have a relationship that's actually growing with Cutie more so than, of course, the princess when you finally beat the game and save the princess. Usually, it's, you have someone who's helping you along your path, but you're really not going to build a relationship with them. You're going to wait until you save the main princess before you actually start a relationship with someone, and that's going to, of course, be the princess. This game took a slightly different approach, and throughout these cutscenes and all, it makes more sense that way, because you're actually spending more time with Cutie than you are with the princess. So it would make more sense to have a relationship with her, but, just like many video games, you, of course, are waiting for the princess. You're not gonna, go and run off with, the handmaiden if you can have the princess, right? But this game at least takes a different approach to it. And all in all, in the end, it really turns out to be a good ending, so that's what's really cool about this. And this is, of course, level 3, and it's the same enemies we fought before. We have a green color scheme that we are dealing with. And the plants are back again. Instead of dealing with those weird fish mouths, we have the plants again, but the same thing that we dealt with in the first level with them. As I'm just continuing to run. The worst enemies probably in the game, we haven't, actually no, the worst enemies we haven't faced yet. The second worst enemies are those giant, weird sphere type things that kind of look like one of the monsters from Doom. Those big red gelatinous, abominations that shoot crap at you in the Doom games. That's kind of what those things remind me of, for whatever reason. But they're easily the second worst enemy to deal with, just because they're, at some points in the game, later on, you have so many of them. You'll have like 2 or 3 of them on screen at once, and it's just a real pain, as I just easily take out that boss before I even start talking about him. Basically, a bull that shoots lightning after it charges. Walk forward and keep hitting it with the sword, and the game will glitch. You'll knock him through the wall like I did. He'll appear out the other side, run to that side, hit him a few times, and he's done for. He does very, very little damage, and it's one of the easiest bosses to take care of. Now, World 3-2, as in 2-2, we climbed up. Well, in 3-2, it's the same basic graphics and all, just done in a green and purple scheme of color. We're going down. This is basically the same style of cliffs that we climbed up in 2-2. Here in 3-2. Oh yay. As bats will try to hit me in the head, and I'll duck under them in order to get past them. The background's, of course, extremely weird because of the eyeballs that are kind of looming, looking at you, or at least what looks like to me to look like eyeballs. Jump over the slime. I don't feel like dealing with him right now. The weird slimes that when they pop up, they like to dance around and throw spears at you. Okay, boss 3-2, the mini-boss. This guy, looks like he's flexing his muscle as he's randomly also throwing random rocks at us at the same time, so it's actually really funny to watch. Okay, here we go with boss of level 3. I'm going to use my fires, and he takes kind of the mask off of him first, then you can actually see like this old wrinkled face inside of this weird machine. Hit him a few times, and then you're dealing with a weird naked beaver. And that's basically the only way I can, describe this guy. He spits bubbles out, so he could be an aquatic style animal. And he has a beaver-like tail that, even though it's weirdly pulsating, is still he still looks like a beaver. So I've always referred to him as the giant naked beaver boss. I really don't know his actual correct name, if he has one. It may have been in the manual, but I really don't think so. As we now go back and seeing, of course, the Emperor, the ruling force that took over, who's now enjoying his rest, continuing, even though all hell is crumbling around him. All the enemies he's sent forth to try to kill Astyanax have all failed so far. But he's just gonna sit back and relax and chill and listen to everyone listen to his number one in command come back to him and say, hey, everyone you've sent out so far has sucked and died, but no need to worry, let's just keep, throwing people out, or, I'll just go ahead and do it myself. At this point, he's saying that I have, put a more strong spell on Princess Rosebud so she can no longer talk telepathically. I don't even really know what kind of spell would, have done that, as we... the worst names in probably gaming history go along with this game, unfortunately, but as a kid, I really didn't care. The fact that, you have Princess Rosebud, which, of course, when I think of Rosebud, or even more appropriately, the episode of The Critic that has, or multiple episodes of The Critic that had Orson Welles in them, especially when he does the commercial for Rosebud Frozen Peas. Yes, an all-time classic in animation. It's too bad that show only lasted like one season, because it was one of the funniest cartoons from my youth. But, yeah, so, Princess Rosebud can no longer talk to Cutie telepathically, even though Cutie kind of knows where she's already going, so really kind of useless. And, that was put on by the great mighty Thorn Dog, the second in command here, as we are now in the absolute, positively worst level in the entire game, 4-1, aka Marshy, the worst level in Astyanax. And yes, and why is that? Is because there's so many pitfalls to fall into, as well as so many enemies, like of course the jumping little fish, as well as the mighty mutated fish that like to spear me, that of course jumping off at any moment's notice, kind of like the random fish type monsters from the Castlevania series. And, of course, if they hit me while I'm doing a jump or on certain platforms, they will knock me off right into the wonderful purple gack that has flooded this area of the world. Poisonous marsh. Yeah, it's kind of funny. But either way, I'm going to use my fire ability just because the game's slowing down a little bit. I guess it's a good time to talk about certain problems that this game has, besides some of the hit detection. This is kind of awful at points. Is really just because of how graphical the game is, and I know, oh my god, the game's graphical? Yeah, of course. For an NES game, this game actually is pretty graphical. The backgrounds are pretty detailed, all the enemies and all are pretty detailed. I actually just got a power-up. Randomly, in some totems, you'll actually find Cutie somehow stuck in a totem. I don't know, I thought she was just on my shoulder following me the whole time, but somehow she got in the totem. And basically, she'll either upgrade your sword if you don't have the sword already upgraded, or upgrade your magic. So you have the choice in the matter to do either one of those. But since it really didn't matter, I just went ahead, of course, and went with magic over sword ability. But like I was saying, the only real problems with the game, besides the hit detection, is the slowdown because of how graphical the game really is, with all the details and all the different colors and all. But this was a later NES game. Of course, it was 1990, but nowhere still near the end. You still had like 2-3 good years full of creations for the NES, full game releases for the NES, as I'm now doing battle with the boss of Marshy, which is a gold skeleton. You have like the hardest level in the game, but at least they reward you by giving you an easy boss. So if you finally make it through that level, you're facing off with a very easy boss, so then you can just beat it very quickly. It's the boss you fight as a normal enemy all the time, and then you can just kind of move on to the next area. As we now move on to 4-2, which is called Grave. And I wonder why it's called Grave. Is it the fact that there's coffins skulls. I also want to know, how did this, I thought Nintendo of America had a problem with, like, religious things. I mean, how did, the crosses not get taken out in this game? Maybe just games they actually gave a crap about and thought would do good. Maybe those are the games they take the crosses out of. Because I know for a fact, like, for example, Final Fantasy on the NES, they had crosses in the game, but they had to replace them when they released it in the American, version of the game because of Nintendo of America's problem with religious stuff in their games. But I guess certain games, either they didn't play long enough to find the crosses, or they just let them go in general.